Salutations, respected viewers. This is George from Ireland. So I'm carrying on my videos commenting on Tomi Lahren's racially loaded screeds. So Tomi Lahren, as I pointed out previously, as you probably know if you're watching this, she's an American right-wing pundit, if that be the word, commentator. She was on The Blaze. She was booted off for saying that she was pro-abortion. She said, because she's into small government. Stay out of my guns, stay out of my body. Which is odd, really, because we're not born with guns, whereas women are born with uteruses. But perhaps you would like it for a Buddha who was born with a gun. So she's well known for nativist sentiment, for railing against immigrants. This is where I left off last time, saying you don't come here without skills. Well, I realise there are reasons to be against excessive immigration. Even she's not against all immigration, I don't think. All right, so she wants only highly educated people to come, and there are Einstein visas and so on, and they can be useful. And there are some people who obviously don't have degrees. She doesn't seem a very educated person, even though she has a degree, who've not completed secondary education, things like that. But often they come from less economically developed countries where there are fewer education opportunities. They may live in a terrible penury, but you know that's absolutely fine. She doesn't care about poverty or doesn't want the government to ever intervene to try and help the needy, because that would be being a social justice warrior. That would be socialism. Socialism, the kind of thing which really means that we have 100% literacy in more developed countries, or we have publicly funded healthcare in Western Europe, or we have higher life expectancy than the United States and Western Europe, and on and on. But somebody's got to do the less well-paid jobs, and Americans can do those, obviously. Employers sometimes find it difficult to get people to do these, and people who've just immigrated from other countries sometimes do these. You don't come here not speaking English. Obviously, her ancestors didn't arrive in the United States speaking English. You've got to learn somewhere, and most countries in the world aren't Anglophone, and it's more difficult to acquire complete mastery of a language if one lives outside the country where that language is the primary one. So I think she's being about unreasonable for her expectations. I realise we live in a more globalised world, and so it's easier to acquire command of English now than it was in the 19th century when her forebears left Norway and Germany to come to the United States. There was a lot of anti-German sentiment in the mid-19th century. Nativists, know-nothings, railed against the Germans coming in the 1840s and so on. And there was a lot of anti-German bigotry around the First World War and indeed around the Second World War. Gladly, it's all disappeared. I don't want anyone to suffer racial prejudice, but Tomi Lahren does, so it seems. So she's against handouts. She's an avowed anti-socialist. She then mentioned that her uncle's a farmer. Did he get subsidies? I don't know that he did. Perhaps he didn't receive any subvention. I realise subsidies can be too much, but I would be interested to know whether he honoured her principle. I know she's not answerable for her uncle's behaviour. So she appears to have a superiority complex about the United States, and more than a few Americans feel this way. In fairness, it's difficult not to feel that way if one's nation is very puissant. You look at the United Kingdom, think back to its imperial zenith of a century ago, and many British people laboured on this misapprehension that the United Kingdom was the best at everything, which of course was always preposterous. There were some quite good things about the UK. It was more advanced in science and technology for a while in the 18th century, maybe early 19th century, but that's it. And obviously I think very few people in the United Kingdom would now believe their country is the best at everything, or even the best at most things. So the US, let's say, well, that's where the scientific breakthroughs are made these days. It's certainly got military prowess, and this is the fallacy, that because a country's got the best military technology, those people tend to believe that the best everything, their political and economic system, their culture, everything about the country must be absolutely tip-top. So I don't think that means that America's peerless in all areas of achievement, and increasingly Chinese people are feeling a bit conceited because their country's becoming mighty, perhaps Indians will feel like this a century from now. In other parts of the world, some people were convinced of the innate superiority of everything about their country. So if you subscribe to that foolish opinion, perhaps you shouldn't go abroad. I get the distinct impression that Miss Lahren is not well travelled. So she said that the United States produces the best food in the world. Does it? She didn't evince the least evidence for that. Well, it produces plenty of food. You could look at the size of some Americans, and I'm not exactly skinny myself. Is it the best quality? It could be that it is. She didn't cite which particular things it is. Is it corn? Is it beef? Is it what? Is it pizza? Is it Well, pancakes? It could be some marvellous food, but I don't really know of any reason to think that country's the best at producing food. I'm not saying that the British Isles is the best at this. So she then denounced the government for watering down regulation on labelling, saying, and now, you think something is produced in the United States, even if it's just packed in the United States. But she likes deregulation. She was praising Trump to the moon for persuading Congress to deregulate. So you can't have it both ways. You either want deregulation or you don't. So she's totally against universal health care, all right? So you don't really care about your fellow Americans, do you? I mean, their suffering could easily be relieved, but the billionaires shouldn't have to give a penny to those who are struggling in penury, to those who are suffering agony. We should just let them die. That's your problem. But the military gets universal health care. Are they lazy sacks of shit? That's what she called other people who she thinks are getting state handouts. No, I don't think the military are lazy. So, but why should everybody subsidise the military's healthcare? Shouldn't they have to pay health insurance out of their salaries like everybody else does? What's so special about them? You might say, but they go on hazardous missions, things like that. They're in the combat zone. Okay, yeah, so that's an occupational hazard. People in construction sometimes get killed in accidents and so on. Now, I don't object to the military getting free healthcare, but I don't see why it would then be so terrible for everyone to get publicly subsidised healthcare. I mean, everybody contributes their way through their job. All right, there are a few people who are unemployed. So she's against a single-payer system for healthcare. The military is a single-payer system that everybody has to pay into it, whether they approve of this or not, whether they want to use this service or not, whether they approve of the US military being in Iraq or Afghanistan. You don't get a personal choice. The government decides for you, drags you into it. So why can we not apply that to healthcare then? So she's against big government, and yet she is always singing the praises of the military, which is the biggest of big government, which consumes most of the money. And obviously when people join the military, they can't choose what they wear, sometimes even what they eat, how they walk, words they say. All sorts of choices are taken out of their hands. That's big government. And you want taxes reduced, cut military spending. She's a fervent advocate of keeping people without trial in Guantanamo Bay. Hundreds of men, some of them have been there since 2002. 16 years detention without trial. It's a screaming outrage. America can't be the land of the free when it does that to people. Doesn't matter whether they're American citizens or not. Would she accept it if, let's say, Iran kidnapped Americans from the far side of the globe, brought them back to Iran, locked them up there without trial for years? I don't think so. What sauce for the goose must be sauce for the gander? So mass incarceration, she seems to have no problem with that. Well, that's big government. She likes the Constitution, just doesn't like that a bit about the right to a fair trial. If you're a dark-skinned person, if you believe in Islam, then you don't have these rights. You can be locked up forever, which is a gross injustice. The beginning, when it was brought in, I thought in the short term it was necessary. I felt uncomfortable about it. I thought it's a temporary measure. In this case of exigency, we should do it. But this in extremis argument no longer applies. It's years later, and very, very few Americans are killed by Islamist terrorists. They're killed by white supremacists. They're killed in ordinary mass shootings. Civil liberties aren't suspended there. But yet people are held in Guantanamo Bay, which obviously is an absolute disgrace. So she obviously doesn't believe in liberty, and she's obviously a complete coward if she thinks because a couple of people a year might get killed by Islamists that the Constitution, that civil liberties should be thrown out. No, we can't have them in supermax because they might escape, when the risk of them escaping is very, very small indeed. They're almost always caught when that happens. But when it comes to mass shootings, nope, there must be absolutely no restrictions on gun rights whatsoever. So you can see there's a complete disconnect here. She's obviously completely hypocritical on this one. In one, wanting to completely throw out civil liberties, in the other saying have an absolutely unrestricted right to carry even the most dangerous firearms everywhere. And you'll notice her attitude's got nothing to do with the level of risk, with the roughly 10,000 people a year killed by gun violence in the United States, and she wants no action taken that whatsoever. Yet if, say, 2 people got killed by ISIS a year, something in the United States, she wants parts of the Constitution abrogated. So what underpins this all? What's the common thread? And I suppose she thinks that shooting people dead, that's white Americans do that, so that's acceptable. Whereas if your Muslim person sets up a bomb or something, well, that's foreign, that's an alien. So really it's all about nativism, xenophobia. But I'm such a xenophile, I'm proud to say I'm the polar opposite of Tomi Lahren.